Pleasure to welcome Rabbanit Navit Tzadik, as you heard from Othniel, making her debut into our motion. So I want to welcome her. She runs, as I mentioned, the online Beit Midrash, the Eliza Flato online Beit Midrash at Nishmat, the summer program she teaches in Midrash Torah Avoda. I believe you were born where? In Boston? I don't remember. Where were you born?
I was born originally in New York.
Oh, in New York. Okay, and I've been living in Israel for a long time, and it's a pleasure to welcome her to our motion. Bakasha, Rabbanit
Thank
Navi.
you. Yes, I'm definitely going to need help with the English because I've been here for a while and my family's very Israeli, so thank God. Okay, I'm going to share a bit, even though I'm not going to start right away with the sources, but I'll share them to start with. I wanted to start with to talk about in general, understanding the significance of the korbanot, the different offerings that we bring on Chag HaSukkot. I think in general, we just finished Yom Kippur, and so many of the different holidays are so focused on what's happening in the Mikdash, what's happening in the temple, and not just what you're doing at home. Very obviously, we just came out of Yom Kippur, and there the focus, I think, of the day is, Kohen Gadol, the high priest, going into the holiest place once a year, and Avodat Kohen Gadol that we hear about at length. And even though we read it, it's a very different feeling than actually having this happen. And in general, a lot of the holidays are very focused on what's happening in the Mikdash. And I think there's a special significance also in Chag HaSukkot in terms of what's happening in the Mikdash and how focused this holiday is and connected to the Mikdash. So also one just tidbit about that is also in Israel, I think it's even felt even more. And more people are not just going to the kotel. We heard about this morning. The kotel is, that outside western wall. There's a lot more to the western wall. There's actually 4 walls around the Har HaBayit, the Temple Mount, and you can get to all 4 of them. The truth is, you don't have to go to the western one. You can go to the eastern one, which is a little bit from the earlier times and probably closer to where you want to be, and also facing the right direction. And thousands of people go on Sukkot and many times during the year up to the Temple Mount on Sukkot and other times. Of course, you have to go to the mikveh before, but many people are doing it. What we're not doing right now is the sacrifices, but I do think it's a good thing to read and understand it about. So in Bamidbar, we hear about the different sacrifices that have been brought, okay? And it says, Chamisha Asar Yom Lechodesh HaShvi'i, Mikra Kodesh Yelachem. So first of all, Kom Lachat Avla Lo Tasu. It says here, right, you don't do any work, no malacha. Chagogtem Chag LaHashem Shiv'a Yamim, and this is the 7 days, and we'll talk in a minute about what happens to that Shmini Atzeret, which of course is not Simchat Torah that we turned it into be. It's its own holiday from the Torah called Shmini Atzeret. I know in Chutz La'aretz we have like those 2 days because the 2-day Yom Tov we can call 2 different things, but essentially this is the day. It's called Shmini Atzeret on the 8th day. On the first day, Yikraftem Ola Ishe Reach Nichoach LaHashem. And the first thing we bring is the bulls, Parim, Bnei Bakar, 13. We bring 13 of them. Okay, so in the English, I put them so that it's a little bit more clear what we're bringing when, right? The first one, we bring the 13 bulls, and then 2 rams and 14 lambs. Okay? And as we know, we go throughout and then we continue on. If we had more time, we could talk about also the different minachot, but we're not going to go into that so much. And there's a longer list in terms of what other things that we're bringing, but I wanted to focus mostly on those 3 and mostly on the bulls that we're bringing. Okay, and then the second day we're bringing the bulls again, but less. Instead of 13, we're bringing 12, and every day it sort of goes down. So the 3rd day we're bringing 11, and the 4th day we're bringing 10. The 2 things that remain the same for now all through Sukkot is the rams are always 2, and the lambs are 14. Okay, besides for the meal offerings that we're also bringing. And every day it sort of goes down. So I'm getting to the 5th day where we're to 9, 6th day we're already at 8, and the 7th day, which is essentially the last day of Chag HaSukkot, we're bringing 7, but still the 2 rams and the 14 lamps. Okay, and then comes the 8th day, which is a whole question itself of, is this like a completely new day or sort of part of this day of Sukkot? And then something completely changes, right? And even the wording in the psukim, I'll go back to the Hebrew for a minute, Hashmini atzeret yelachem, right? This is like the first time it says that we had these 7 days, and now we have like almost a new holiday, sort of, even though it's very connected. And definitely the sacrifices are very different. And we bring 1 bull and 1 ram and 7 lambs. Okay, so that's those are just the regular korbanot. What does it sound like that we're bringing so many to begin with and we go down? So for many of us, this sounds like, and I'm going to go down for a minute, I'm just going to skip over to the sorry. It sounds very much like what we hear about on Hanukkah, right? In general, Hanukkah is mitzvat Hanukkah ner ishu beito, which means that every household could light just 1 candle on Hanukkah, and that would be enough. But most people want to do more than that, and therefore you could light for every single night 1 for each person. But we like to do even more than that, the mehadrin, mina mehadrin, and we like to do the best of the best. And of course, when it comes to the best, all of a sudden it's unclear how we're supposed to do this mitzvah, which is interesting because if we didn't do the best of the best, then it would be clear that we only need 1. But once we do the best of the best, which is the mahadrin, mina mahadrin, all of a sudden it's unclear which way we're supposed to be doing it. And then there's a dispute between Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel. Okay, so when Hanukkah says that the best of the best, on the first day, according to Beit Hillel, we would light 8, and then every single day we would light 1 less. Whereas Beit Hillel says the first day we would light 1, and every day we would go up. Okay, and the question is, why is there this machloket?
Navit, can I interrupt for a second? I'm getting a lot of comments that I can hear you fine, but I think a lot of people are saying they have difficulty hearing you. I don't know if the mic is, there's just maybe a slight echo reverberating. I don't know if you want to get closer. I don't know if there's anything else you can do. I'm not the tech expert here, but if
Okay, I'm going to try to maybe scream towards it, and maybe that will help because I'm not exactly sure where the mic is. But if I scream, please let me know if this is helping at all.
yeah.
Okay.
I can hear you okay. I don't know about other people, but whatever. Okay. Try
Okay.
to speak whatever slowly and clearly, and people will hopefully do the best they can.
Okay, sorry. I will try to scream a bit. I do know how to scream usually, but I'm not exactly sure what I do without the microphone here. So sorry for that. Okay. Hanukkah, as we were saying, we also have this dispute in terms of Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel. Beit Shammai says we start with like a more massive amount, right? We start with 8, and then every day we go less. Whereas Beit Hillel says that we start with the small amount and we go higher. And the Gemara asks, what's the reason for this dispute? Okay. And the Gemara comes to the conclusion, okay, meaning there's 2 different ideas of what could be the reason for this dispute. But in general, the Gemara concludes that Beit Shammai took this idea of the bulls on Sukkot, and he ran with that idea, right? In the same way that the bulls started with this 13 and just kept going down, so too Beit Shammai thought that's what you do also in Hanukkah. You start with like 8, and then every day you go down. Whereas Beit Hillel thought that once you sanctify something, you just have to keep going up, and ma'alim b'kodesh ve'en moridim, and you don't put down less. You don't lessen when it comes to downgrade when it comes to sanctity. The truth is, it's interesting because even though we go by Beit Hillel for Hanukkah, everybody agrees. Beit Shammai also agrees, and everybody agrees that nobody's allowed to downgrade when it comes to sanctifying anything. No one's allowed to downgrade. So, for instance, if we have, an Aron Kodesh, for instance, or something that held a Sefer Torah, or parchment that went bad, or something that was in a higher level of kedusha, a higher level of holiness, we're not allowed to use it afterwards for something that's less holy. Whereas if we used it for something that was less holy to begin with, we are allowed to use it for something that is on a higher level of holiness. There's no dispute about that. Those are Mishnayot and Masechet Megillah. It's very, very clear that Malim b'kodesh ve'en moridim. Everybody agrees that you have to, once you have something that's on a high level of Kedusha, you're not allowed to take it down from that level. One of the things that the Gemara says also when it comes to Yom Kippur, there's like a Sgan Kohen Gadol, right? We just said how focused it is on the high priest and in the Beit HaMikdash. And he needs somebody else just in case he becomes impure that day. He needs somebody else to his assistant to help him and become the Kohen Gadol that day if we need to. And then if that does happen and he becomes a Kohen Gadol, we don't afterwards just make him like any other Kohen, even though it was supposed to be, temporary. Anyway, once he became the status of Kohen Gadol, we don't really bring him down the status, and it's a whole question of what we do with him. But in general, everybody agrees with that. So it's more of a question of Beit Shammai. What was Beit Shammai thinking on Hanukkah? We'll go back to first our sacrifices, of course, now. During Sukkot, what was the Torah thinking with starting so strong and then just keep going down? Okay, so I'm going back, okay, to the sacrifices. And I'm going to talk for 1 second about what happened to Shmini Atzeret and what happens this day. There's a beautiful midrash about Shmini Atzeret. I have to say that I used to think, well, first let's read the midrash. But Yom Shmini Atzeret Yelachem. This is what the Torah tells us on the 8th day. This, you have a solemn assembly. V'ikravtem ola yisherech nichoch laHashem par ben bakar echad ayil echad. Okay, at least this part of the midrash only brings the one bull and the one ram, which of course is so small after so much was brought beforehand. And interesting how much was done. The midrash sees of how little is done on Shmini Atzeret. Okay, and then the midrash tells us that a parable is brought. Okay, and it's like a king who held a feast for 7 days, and he invited all the people, okay, to this banquet. And when the 7 days passes, he says to the one he loves, right? He says to his beloved, by now we partaken from all the people in the land. And here, I don't know if this is said in the same way in English as it says in Hebrew. Okay, let us roll for what we'll find. In Hebrew, it says, nitgalgel, ani va'ata. Okay, and the word nitgalgel, like, which means actually, literally to roll, means we'll open a can of tuna kind of thing, meaning it's okay, whatever we have is fine. We don't need anything extravagant. And it says a little bit of meat or a little bit of fish or even vegetables, okay? And that's what HaKadosh Baruch Hu says to Am Yisrael on the 8th day, Tieh lachem gilgilu b'ma she'atem motzi'im. Okay, meaning we'll roll to whatever we find, meaning very little. I don't need anything more than just very little once Am Yisrael are with Hashem. Okay, so seemingly there's this 8th day, which is a very, very different day than these 7 days beforehand. The 7 days was very extravagant, very extravagant. There were so many sacrifices in extraordinary amount. It comes up to 70 bulls altogether. And even though we keep going down, there's still a lot. And the last day is like so different. And even though there's 7 lambs, there's just one bull and one ram, and seemingly it goes like a lot down. And Chazal say it's sort of this like day just for Am Yisrael and HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which also seems to be that when we're going out into the sukkah, it's like you're outside, you're with everyone, it's with the entire world basically. Whereas this last day, Shmini Atzeret, you come inside and it's just us and Hashem. I used to think that it's super tragic that Shmini Atzeret became Simchat Torah, because as we know, Simchat Torah is, I don't want to say a made-up holiday, but it's definitely not a holiday from the Torah. The Torah has a holiday called Shmini Atzeret, and it's a beautiful holiday. And then later on, there were 2 different customs in terms of how to read the Torah. One custom was in Babylonian, how we were reading once a year, we would finish the entire Torah, and therefore sometimes we have to make the parshas a little bit longer, or even put 2 parshas together. where in Israel, the idea was to finish it in 3 years. And like a lot of the customs, we took the Babylonian custom, and it ended up that this is the day that we finish the entire Torah after we sort of crammed in a few parshas together if need be, and made some of the parshas longer. And we call this day Simchat Torah, but the truth of the matter is the day is really Shmini Atzeret. That's the holiday that it was supposed to be to begin with. Okay. And I used to think that this was very tragic for Shmini Atzeret, that this day became Simchat Torah, but it's clear that there wasn't so clear what was like the content of this day. We have, sitting in a sukkah for 7 days, and we have even taking the Arbat Minim for all these days, and we have just a lot of content in most of the holidays. And all of a sudden there's this holiday, and we're told that the content is to be happy with Hashem. Is being happy means that we eat a lot of meat? Seemingly not, because what it says here is that there's this parable of how it's very little. When it comes to sacrifices, you're bringing very little. It's not important what you're eating. It's just for the happiness. Va'ita ach sameach. You're just supposed to be happy and content. Am Yisrael and HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And we sort of miss that Shmini Atzeret day by putting in a different content on one hand. On the other hand, after I thought about it for a longer time, I thought that maybe Simchat Torah is the content, meaning we try to find some content, what it means to be just happy, us and Hashem. And there's nothing more special than Am Yisrael receiving this Torah and being able to learn it again and again. And therefore, Am Yisrael decided to put the content of learning Torah and finishing the entire Torah into this day of Shmini Atzeret, which is the actual day of just being happy with Hashem. Okay? But definitely the focus is not on the sacrifices, because there's much less than there is. When it comes to the different sacrifices, especially the bulls, we have a pretty famous midrash that says, Amar Rabbi Pinchas, right? Rabbi Pinchas said, Kol otan shiv'im parim, these 70 bulls that were brought, Yisrael hayu makrivim bechag keneged shiv'im umot ha'olam. Okay? There were the 70, I don't know if it's exactly 70, but this is usually corresponds to 70 different nations, right? 70 different languages, 70 different nations, this utopic number of the 70 different nations of the world. And if you do the math, we bring in the end of the day 70 different bulls. And the idea was for all the different nations of the world. And once we were exiled and there was no Beit HaMikdash and we weren't bringing it anymore, all of a sudden they realized what they were missing. And the 70 different nations were very upset, seemingly, that we didn't bring it anymore. So we have this idea of the 70 nations and the bulls. What we don't understand so much is why it's going down, and also why the bulls is parallel to that. Okay, there's another midrash on the differences between the bulls, the rams, and the lambs. And the midrash says like this, Parim b'nei bakar. Okay, the bulls, the young oxen, mikan kol makom shekatuv par, every time where it says bull, apparently in terms of bringing a sacrifice, it's keneged Avraham, it's supposed to correspond to Avraham Avinu. Just like it says, ve'ela bakar ratz Avraham. Okay, we know that Avraham gave, at least according to Chazal, he gave a tongue to the angels that were coming to visit him, that obviously he did not know that they were angels. But the meat that he was giving them was meat from bulls, and therefore it's supposed to correspond to the bull, Avraham. Ayil is for Yitzchak, okay? Like it says that Avraham took the Ayil, meaning instead of taking Yitzchak or Akedat Yitzchak, he took the Ayil, and the Kvasim were for Yaakov, just like it says when Yaakov was leaving Laban's house, and he was constantly taking care of his sheep, and then that was also the lambs that he took for himself afterwards. Okay, so that's for Yaakov. And then it says the same idea of how it corresponds to the 70 different nations. Okay, and in this midrash, it's a little bit different than the other midrash that we brought before. It says here, why are we having them go down from day to day? Okay, so that Hashem saves us from their hand. and causes them to perish from the world, and therefore they diminish day by day. Okay? Seemingly, there's really two very different midrashim. One midrash that's saying that we're sort of the reason for Am Yisrael sacrificing all these sacrifices of bulls is in order so that we continuously have the different nations of the world among us in the world. And this midrash looks at it very differently and says we're doing the exact opposite. We're bringing it so that they're not here anymore by the end, and they sort of diminish every single day. I think there is a way to put those two things together, essentially, and try to figure out how it could be that at the same time that we're asking that they diminish every day, we're also sort of bringing a sacrifice in their name and want them to be there. Okay? Before that, I would like to look for 1 second at a midrash that talks about Avraham. Since the bulls are supposed to correspond to Avraham, we have so much to say about Avraham and his character and the way he was in terms of all the different nations and what he did for this world and bring Hashem's name into the world. One midrash that shows it so nicely is in Masechet Sotah, okay, where it says, Vaikra Sham B'Shem Hashem El Olam. The verse tells us that every time that Avraham made an altar, he called out in the name of the Lord. And Reish Lakish says about that, what does that mean, he called out? In Hebrew, the word Vaikra could also be written with a little bit of a different nikud. It could be written Vayakri, okay? That he made others call out, not necessarily that he was calling out. And it says, Shikri Avraham Avinu Lishmo Shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu, not necessarily that he was the one to call out, but he made others call out. How did that happen? People would come to his tent constantly in order to eat and drink, and they got up to say thank you and to give him a blessing for what he had given them. And then he said, this is not my food. What are you giving me a blessing for? You have to say thank you to God. We have other midrashim that tells us that it was like even to the extent that Avraham would say to them, if you don't want to bless God, then you have to pay me for all this food. And they ended up realizing that they should bless God for this. But what was clear was Avraham was bringing this whole world to this recognition of one God. In a world that people were thinking that there was lots of different beings and gods, Avraham was bringing the whole world to this recognition of one God. And I'm not sure necessarily that it was the beginning of Judaism per se, meaning afterwards we still have Yitzhak, and Yitzhak also still had Esav, until we get to Yaakov, who is Yisrael and the beginning of Am Yisrael. But Avraham definitely did the beginning of the recognition of there being one God in this world. So seemingly, if the Parim are supposed to be corresponding to Avraham, then the midrash that says that we're bringing 70 for the 70 different nations of the world, seemingly we're trying to get the entire nations of the world to be sort of like this Avraham and understand that there's one God in this world, okay? And it also goes with some of the verses that we have in terms of the Beit HaMikdash in general. When the Beit HaMikdash was built the first time, in the time of the first temple, and it tells us in Kings chapter 8, Kings 1, right, when Shlomo HaMelech was building it, it says that there is a bunch of reasons for the building of the temple. One of them being uniting Am Yisrael, which is also what we're doing with the different Arbat Aminim. It was definitely a place for uniting Am Yisrael. We see that because Yeravam ben Navat, who wanted sort of to move Am Yisrael away from Rechavam, who was the son of Shlomo, and his way of doing it was building a different temple, and that was his way of separating Am Yisrael. So obviously the temple was supposed to be this place of worship for all of Am Yisrael, and everyone was sort of supposed to be united there. But more than just Am Yisrael being united, it also seems to be a place to call out in the name of Hashem for all the other people also. And this is what Shlomo says, right? So that we all fear God on all the days that we're here. And also the Nochri here, it says the foreigner, but what it means obviously is not Am Yisrael, right? Not the people of the nation of Israel, that they're coming that they come from a distant land, leman shmecha, not in order to convert and become part of Am Yisrael, just to recognize that there's one God in this world, and they're coming to the holiest place on earth, and there's a place in the Beit HaMikdash that the non-Jews are allowed to also go, and they're here in order to bring their sacrifices to Hashem too. And it says, Ki yishma'u et shimcha gadol bet yadcha chazaka uzroacha hanituya v'ba v'yitpel habayit hazeh. They're coming also because they'll hear about your incredible outstretched hands and how there's no other greater God or one God like Hashem, and they will come to also pray in this place in the Beit HaMikdash. Okay? And it says that Hashem will answer their prayers, right? And it says, Asita k'chol asher yikra lecha anochri, meaning you will do just as they also ask, in order for everyone to know about your name. So they also fear you, just like Am Yisrael. And this house, your name will be on this house, the biggest Kiddush Hashem in this place of Beit HaMikdash. And it's also for people who are outside of Am Yisrael. Okay? Yeshayahu, also in the time of the temple, brings this same idea. This was, of course, Shlomo when in the beginning of the temple, Yeshayahu a little bit later on, way later on actually, but also the first temple. And he says, B'nei Nechar hanilvim el Hashem, right? Those foreigners, one who are not from Am Yisrael, but they join themselves in order also l'sharet et Hashem, because they love Hashem and because they realize that this is one God, and He will bring them to Har Kodsho, right, to the holiest place, His holy mountain, which is the Beit HaMikdash. V'simachti b'beit tfilati. Olotehem v'zivchehem liratzon hamizbachi. Their sacrifices will be accepted on my altar, and the non-Jews also will bring sacrifices. Ki beiti beit tefila ikare lekol ha'amim. My house shall be a call of prayer for all the different nations, not just for Am Yisrael. So the Beit HaMikdash, of course, there's part of it that has a special connection with Am Yisrael, but part of it is also supposed to be a place that is for all the other nations, especially to see God's hands and God's greatness. And part of bringing those 70 bowls are supposed to remind us of those 70 different nations. An interesting tidbit also is about how Sukkot, especially, is a festival that's like very connected, not just to Jews, but also to non-Jews. Not necessarily the non-Jews are supposed to be celebrating this holiday, at least not from what we see in the Mishnah and the Gemara, but seemingly it is something that the Gemara brings in as this idea. First of all, we see it in Sefer Zechariah. In Zechariah, on the last chapter, right? I didn't bring this here on the sheet, but you shouldn't trust me. You should look it up. In the last chapter, on the verses Tet Zayin and Yud Zayin, it says that eventually all the different nations will have to go up and celebrate Chag Sukkot. That's what they're going to have to do. And anybody who doesn't is not going to have rain. So this idea of Sukkot is obviously very universal. There's also, in the beginning of Masechet Avodah Zarah, in the Bavli, it gives us an interesting story about how in the end of the days, all the different nations are going to come to God and say to Hashem, it's not really fair that all of Am Yisrael got the Torah, whereas we didn't get the Torah. And then Hashem's going to say to them, well, I offered you and you didn't want it. So it's your problem that you didn't get it. And then the other nations are going to say, but you didn't do it in the same way you did to Am Yisrael. Am Yisrael kafalem hal kegigit. You forced them to take the Torah. So you asked them, but it wasn't exactly a question. According to at least one of the Midrashim, right? We have the mountain held over our heads, and you didn't hold the mountain over our heads, says the different nations to Hashem. So Hashem says, you know what? Fine. I'll give you one easy mitzvah to do, and take this mitzvah and see if you'll do it. And what mitzvah does he give them? Sukkah. He gives them mitzvah of Sukkot to do. And then they all make their sukkah, and then tells us that's very, very, very hot on that Sukkot. And they end up picking their sukkah and leaving their sukkah. And Hashem says, see, even Sukkot you couldn't do properly. Of course, there's a whole question there. You know, somebody it's very, very hot in the sukkah. We don't have to sit in the sukkah. So why did they have to sit in the sukkah? And the answer the Gemara gives is they didn't have to sit in the sukkah. It was too hot, but they shouldn't have kicked it. Meaning that was the problem. They should have left in like a harder way. Like it should have been hard for them to leave. And the fact that they kicked it was the hard part. We also see Masechet Sukkah, the very end of Masechet Sukkah, like we heard before earlier today, about kicking the altar. There's this idea of if you're kicking it, it's very different than when you leave in a certain manner of leaving the sukkah. One thing that we see though is that Sukkot does have this universal aspect. Shmini Atzeret less, right? That last day, that 8th day is very, very, very intimate between Am Yisrael and Hakadosh Baruch Hu. But the Sukkot has an aspect that's much more universal, that's much more supposed to be also like recognizing the other nations of the world. So the question is, why are we going down? Why are we starting with 13 and then going to 12 and then to 11 and then to 10 and to 9? A similar question on Hanukkah also, which is, why does Beit Shammai think that the best thing possible to do the Mahadrin would be to start with 8 candles and then just keep going down? Okay, so even though we have one midrash that tells us, right, that it's in order to that to diminish the diminish the rest of the nations of the world. Okay, I'll bring that back here. I wanted to think about possibly a different idea of what could be. Why would we be going down every day instead of going up? I think one of the ideas here when it comes to going down, I mean, we start very strongly, right, is if I go back to Hanukkah for 1 second. So what we're trying to do in Hanukkah, and that's definitely what Beit Hillel says, right? We're trying to ma'alim b'kodesh, we're trying to get more kedusha in this world, and we're definitely trying to get more light into the world. And what I didn't read when we read this question of Hanukkah, what I didn't read was that there's a dispute in terms of what Beit Shammai and what Beit Hillel say, the reasoning for them, right? Beit Hillel says it corresponds to the outgoing days, and Beit Shammai says it comes to the incoming days. And some people says, and this is what seems to be the majority opinion, is that it's more of, is it connected to the festival of Sukkot, or should we just be careful that once we started with something that's like on a higher level of sanctity, we don't want to downgrade, okay? I think this idea of bringing in a ton of light into the world and then bringing in less and less light also has to do with the days coming in. On Hanukkah, the days, that's exactly the time that the days start to get longer. We have a famous midrash on Hanukkah on how the first person ever to celebrate Hanukkah was actually Adam Arishon, right? Adam, why did he celebrate Hanukkah? He saw that Hanukkah was he saw that the days were getting shorter, and he thought that it was going to be the end of the world. And exactly Hanukkah time, he saw that the days started getting longer, and he realized that that was just a regular thing, that the days get shorter and then they get longer, and he celebrated this for 8 days, and seemingly that was like the first Hanukkah celebration. And that's basically what's happening on Hanukkah, is that more and more light comes from the outside, and less light is needed from the Chanukiah or from the light that we are bringing as a nation. And it could be that Beit Shammai, when they're saying that you should start very strong, right? You should start with you should start with the 8th day with all the lights that you have, the entire Chanukiah, and then every day you take one away. It's not because Beit Shammai disagree with Beit Hillel and they think that you can go down when it comes to something that's sacred and you can go downgrade in sanctity. It's not that Beit Shammai think that you're allowed to. They just think that you start with the strongest amount that you have, and then once the light starts coming from the outside, you can go down slowly but surely because you're needed less. If we take that, Beit Shammai, I brought it here because it's just easier to see, because they take that parallel to Chag HaSukkot. Beit Shammai learned it from the festival of Sukkot, where the Torah tells us that we start with the 13, and then we go down to 12, we go into 11, and we go down to 10. And we might say to Hashem, what are you doing? Malim b'kodesh ve'en moridim. You don't start strong when it comes to sacrifices and go down every day. If you want to get to 70, you could have started on the first day with the 7 and then gone up every day instead of going down. Why are we going down? And seemingly, if we say that it corresponds to Avraham, Abraham's idea was to shine the light of one God in this world. And when Abraham did that, we start very strong with bringing the most amount of bulls that first day. But every day we bring less because it's needed less. The more we are able to bring this idea of one God into this world, the less we need to afterwards fill it with more and more. So the idea of bringing all the bulls that we have in the very beginning and then every day going down, it's not that we're actually going down. It's that it seems like we're going down because the world is filled with it more. The first day that we bring the most amount of bulls is because we need, like Abraham, corresponds to Abraham, needs to bring this idea of one God into this world in the most strong way possible. And then every day we sort of bring it down. Afterwards, we have the rams, which stay constant the entire time, which is Yitzchak. We don't have time so much to talk about it, but we can say just in a minute that there's like 2 of the different rams, seemingly Yaakov and Esav, that stay there the whole time and still until Shemini Atzeret, that it becomes one. Esav did not have to be Esav. It wasn't like a determined thing from the beginning. We know that there's a lot of parallels to Esav's character and to David HaMelech's character, both very redhead and probably super ADHD kind of personality, and people who are very active, and also have a lot of blood on their hands in the end of the day. But David took it into a very positive way, whereas Esav took it into a very negative way. And we see that throughout the days of Sukkot, we bring 2 rams, whereas the last day we bring only 1, because it becomes intimate between Am Yisrael and Hashem. The last thing is the one that corresponds to Yaakov. So I'll go back to that for 1 minute, where it says that every time it says kvasim, it's supposed to be corresponding to Yaakov, and we see that on the 8th day we bring 7 lambs. Every day until now we bring 14, possibly because we wanted to bring more lambs than we did bulls, because the bulls are corresponding to all the different nations of the world, and the lambs are Am Yisrael, right? Yaakov Avinu. And on the last day, we bring 7. I don't remember now if I brought in the end a famous Maharal. Okay, I'm not sure if it's here. I think I didn't, but a famous Maharal that talks about what's the idea of the 8. Okay, which also connects to the Shmini Atzeret, which is 7 is supposed to be nature, according to Maharal, and the 8th is supposed to be Tikkun Olam, something that we do that's even more than nature. That's why he says the Brit Milah is on the 8th day, because it's like 7 days, like 7 days of creation, 7 days of what is nature, and then the 8th day is something that Am Yisrael do in order to sort of make this world into a better place, which is Tikkun Olam. So seemingly, it could be that we have that 7 days, and that 8th day is supposed to be Shmini Atzeret, particularly for Am Yisrael, and that's where we're supposed to do our Tikkun Olam. Why do we bring 7 lambs? 7 that corresponds to Yaakov Avinu, which is Am Yisrael, but also like Hashem's part of this world. So we on the 8th day bring in Hashem into our lives and have that intimate time with we bring as a sacrifice the 7 lambs, which is supposed to correspond to the nature that Hashem made, but also that intimate time that Shmini Atzeret is supposed to be for the love between Am Yisrael and Hashem. Okay, I know that I said that pretty quickly, but I'm happy to take any questions, and I haven't really looked at the chat to see if
2 minutes for questions, 1.5 minutes for questions. You see in the chat box. Okay, why are more bulls sacrificed on Rosh Chodesh, Pesach, and Shavuos than Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, and Shmini Atzeret? Two, right? That was my share yesterday, by the way, that I gave yesterday on Shabbos, but I'll let you answer the question.
Oh, good. Excellent. So you can answer that question. I don't have a good answer for that.
Okay, very, very quickly with I mean, it's clearly the Torah is distinguishing between the holidays of Tishrei and the rest of the holidays. And the fact that Shmini Atzeret goes with the one Ayal already tells you it's an essence of Yom Hadin. So the Yemei Hadin have one, and the Shalosh Regalim have two, and Rosh Chodesh. Rosh Chodesh is introduction to Pesach. There's more to say, but we don't have time for that. But it is an interesting switch that we go from two Parim on Rosh Chodesh, Rosh Chodesh, Pesach, and Shavuos to one on Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, and Shmini Atzeret. But you see right away how the Torah is dividing up the holidays. Okay, somebody else. Are there more questions? We have to get to Benny, but that's al rega lachat. By the way, Yoel Ben Nun has a very good article on he this the doubling with Chag Asif and Chag Sukkot. That's why, but that's why it's doubled on Sukkot, the Asif and Sukkot part. But for another time. Anybody else want a comment question? Okay. Thank you, Navit, and Chag Sameach, and enjoy. And how old is your youngest?
She's 4.
Four. Okay. Okay. They're all well behaved. They let you teach. That's very impressive.
Thank God. I have one of my older ones taking care of the younger ones.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Very, very good. Okay. Chag Sameach. Thank you.